I'm going to bring out the panelists. Are we ready? Let's make a little noise, Birmingham. Come on, let's make a little noise. All right, the first panelist I'm going to bring out is Dr. Steve Perry. He's a key national leader on ed reform. He's an author, CNN education contributor, host of TV One, docudrama Save My Son, founder of Capital Prep Magnet, and he dresses pretty good too. Look at it. You're looking pretty good.
Do what I can, little bruh.
You're looking pretty good there. This man, 2004, Dr. Perry founded Capital Preparatory Magnet School, a middle school and high school in Hartford, Connecticut. It was one of the lowest performing schools in a particular district. Now he has sent 100% of his graduates to four-year college. Let's give him a round of applause. Dr. Perry walks the talk, though. He's got a bachelor's degree in political science. He went on to get a master's degree, and he went on to get a doctorate in education. This man traveled around the country. For him to be here today, it's an honor. So one more round of applause for Dr. Perry. All right, this next gentleman I'm going to bring out is George Parker, a 30-year veteran, a math teacher in D.C. public schools, and former head of the D.C. Teachers Union. Grew up in, dang, you dressing good too. Doc, look, man. Mr. Parker, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
I might need to borrow that tie when we get done.
You can have it.
I can have it?
You can have it.
All right, y'all heard that. I can have it. George Parker grew up in North Carolina, went on to get a BA in a bachelor's degree in mathematics, got a master's degree in school administration. In 2010, Mr. Parker worked with the next panelist I'm going to bring out to come up with an innovative teacher compensation, professional development, and evaluation system, also part of collective bargaining. Let's give a round of applause for George Parker. And as much as I like these two, I did save the best for last. I'm going to put the Rose. Come on out, Rose. Michelle Reed, Chancellor, former Chancellor of D.C. Public Schools. I think y'all need to clap for her. So Michelle taught for 3 years at Harlem Park Elementary School in Baltimore. She was a part of Teach for America. She got her bachelor's degree from Cornell, went on to get her master's in public policy for Harvard, the Kennedy School. She launched a program called the New Teacher Project. Then she went on in 2011 to Washington, D.C. She was appointed to be chancellor by the former mayor there, Adrian Fenty. I think she has a thing with mayors or for mayors. In 2010, things didn't work out as well as they would like. So not only did the former mayor lose his job, George Parker lost his job, Michelle Reed lost her job. So she started an organization called Students First, and there are 24,000 members that are part of Students First here in Alabama, and she has over 2 million members nationwide. Let's give Chancellor Reed a round of applause. And in the interest of full disclosure, I must say she is my wife, and that is my great claim to fame. So just hold on.
I don't get nothing?
You good with that?
I'm straight.
All right, folks, are we ready? All right, so here's what we're going to do. I think the folks who just arrived are settled. Please write your questions down. We're going to get to as many as possible here. So what we're going to do at the very beginning here is we're going to show you this clicker question here. The question reads, what is your role in education? And we want you underneath your seats or on your tables, there's clickers. And all you have to do, if you're an elementary school teacher, do 1. If you're a middle school teacher, do 2. If you're a high school teacher, 3. If you're an administrator, 4. And if you're other, do 5. We're trying to get a flavor and a feel of who's in the room today. And this will help inform us as we ask some of the questions. So again, please answer your question. All right, so 7% of folks in the room are elementary school teachers, 8% are middle school, 8% high school, 6% administrators. So basically across the board, very even, 10%, 10, 10, and 10, and then we have a little over 60% that are other. All right, everybody good on that? So we're getting a flavor of who's in the room. All right, we'll do a second question here. What is the most important topic for us to cover before we leave tonight? So we want to hear from you. We threw 5 topics up here. Common Core, that's number 1. 2 is school choice. 3 is mayoral and state control of school districts. 4 is teacher evaluation. 5 is unions' role in education, and 6 is other. All right, number 1 topic for folks in Birmingham, it looks like school choice. Number 2 is Common Core. Number 3 is teacher evaluations. We have a tie for 4, which is unions' role in school, and other, and then lastly, the role that mayor and states play. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take cards from folks in the audience. Please fill them out. People will make sure that work for students first. We'll make sure they're not redundant questions. We'll try to make sure we get as many as possible. We're not gonna be selective, but we wanna make sure we're not covering the same topic. So again, we'll get started here. I'll start off with asking maybe each of you a quick personal question. Let's see who should go first. Dr. Perry. For you, there's talk about creaming, attrition, and profiting. So that's your question. Tell me your perspective.
All right. First, I feel like I should be nice like this. Strange place to do education. First question is about creaming. I'm the principal and founder of a magnet school in Hartford, Connecticut. It's a public school. I had to fill out a slip today to make sure I can come here, just take the day off. So if y'all call back and say he was in Birmingham, they're gonna say we know. And so we run a lottery. Lottery is just that. The students are selected based upon that in a school system that's all choice. So people say, well, you get the parents who know better. Well, every parent in the system has to select a school or one will be chosen for them. So it's a level playing field. And creaming from where? It's one of the poorest cities in the country. That's over 90% of color. These kids came from somebody's school before they came to us. So if they were so good before, how come it didn't show up in the scores? Maybe it's possible, as the data suggests, that they actually can grow when you put them in front of a school where people care and have the capacity to make great things happen. So when you believe in kids, they're all the cream. I get excited that after just a year with us, that they've done well enough that some folks don't recognize them anymore. I think they're all beautiful and capable. I think that there's something amazing in each and every one of them. So for me, that's exciting that there's a point at which people don't recognize them anymore. So there's the creaming conversation. Attrition, we're a school of choice, which means people choose to get in and people can choose to leave. But what they're trying to suggest is that we're kicking kids out. Our school is a magnet school, and in Connecticut, what that means is a school that has to desegregate Hartford, which means to bring white people in. And so if we don't have white kids in our school, they'll shut us down. I'm gonna get t-shirts that say got white people, so they don't shut us down. And y'all laughing, I'm for real. So
did I introduce him as Steve Harvey? This
right.
is Steve Harvey, the comedian.
My good friend. So most of the children who leave our school are white children from the suburbs whose bus ride is typically 90 minutes or more. And apparently being a minority isn't as much fun as we make it look. So the lion's share of the children who actually do leave do so for that reason. And then the expectations of the school. We're a year-round college preparatory school. Discipline is of the utmost importance in our schools. The reason why you can walk in our school and see rare is there a fight or anything like that. No fights. We've been in school since July 9th. We just don't have fights in our school because not everybody likes what we have to offer. That's why I support school choice. Everything ain't for everybody. Capital prep is not designed for everybody. And profiteering, I mean, are you serious? Nah. If I'm running a public school, where's the profit? I hear about these billionaires. I'm looking for one, so if any of you know any, I'm courting one. We are funded by the same people that the rest of the schools in the city are funded by. And so at the end of the day, school choice to me means the opportunity to select the school that's best for your child. If your child wants an art school, then she should be able to go to art school. You want a homeschool, they should be able to homeschool. They want to go to a traditional school where they have a prom and everything else, they should have that. I don't care who necessarily runs the school. I'm not pro-charter, I'm pro-choice. I'm not pro-magnet, I'm pro-choice. I'm not pro-neighborhood school, I'm pro-choice. The best school for the best, the best fit for the best child, for the child. So for me, in the end, these are simply tactics that people use to try and undermine a real conversation. If you don't want that school for your child, then keep them where you got them. But if you want what I want, which is the beauty of every single child to be uncovered, then you have to put them in the best learning environment possible.
Awesome. I think we need to give them a quick round of applause for that. I'm going to try not to call you honey in front of all these people. So.
Me or her? Because I don't want you calling me honey.
I'm going to call you honey boo. Chancellor, personal. Question for you. Everyone and everywhere we go, people always say you're anti-teacher. Can you address that?
So I think that this comment that people have said a lot about me is an interesting one because I actually come from teachers. My paternal grandfather was a teacher. My maternal grandmother, 5 of my aunts, my sister-in-law, my best friend. I've my entire life been surrounded by teachers. And it's because I grew up around teachers that I saw every day the true power that teachers have, number one, to impact the lives and futures of children. But I also saw every day how incredibly difficult it is to be an effective teacher. And so I think that the most effective teachers in our country must be recognized and rewarded and respected for the heroic work that they're doing every day, and I do not believe that that is happening. But because I also know how difficult it is to be a teacher, I also believe that not everyone can do it. Right now in this country, in a lot of school districts, if you have a pulse and you pass the criminal check, we will stick you in a classroom. And I just think that it's demeaning to the profession to believe that that is the case. It is the most difficult job there is, which obviously means that not everyone can do it. So I believe just as we have millions of incredibly effective teachers in this country, we also have some ineffective teachers. And for those people, we need to quickly identify them. We need to help professionally develop them and see if we can get them better. But if we cannot quickly improve their practice, then I very strongly believe that they do not belong in the classroom. Because our children are the most precious resource that this country has. And we cannot afford to have them, not for one day, much less a year or two, afford to have them in the classroom of an ineffective teacher. I don't believe that by saying that or by advocating for policies to remove ineffective teachers, I don't believe that that's anti-teacher at all. In fact, I think that it is pro-teacher, and I think it's elevating the teaching profession by acknowledging the fact that it is an incredibly difficult job to do.
All right, thank you. So you heard Dr. Perry talk about creaming a little bit. You heard the Chancellor talk about this notion of anti-teacher and what that means. Mr. Parker, I'd love for you to address this question.
I know it's a tough one.
Did you sell out? I mean, you represented the teachers union, now you're on the payroll of Michelle Reed, so I feel like a normal question for you is, did you sell out?
Good question. Let me start with this and to talk about, first of all, who I am, right? And who I am. I grew up in the South, in poverty, in the segregated South. where I knew the value of an education. My only way out of poverty was a good education, and I got one. Through my traveling and through my experiences, and I have been a 30-year teacher in public schools, and that was because I wanted to give to kids what my teachers gave me, all right? And I became union president, and quite frankly, as union president, I got caught up in the hype. And the hype is, you must stay in a box. And I think this is a problem we have in education today, is that everybody chooses a little box, and you can't get out of that box. And if you get out of that box, you selling out, or you are the enemy. And I'll be honest with you, if I can take the time to do this, to tell you what really kind of brought me back to who I was and where I came from. I was speaking at a school one day. I think it was a third grade promotional exercise. And, you know, kids ask you as a union president, what do you do? And I said, well, I make sure that teachers have the kind of resources that they're supposed to have or that they need in order to make sure you get a good education. And I said, and I make sure you got the best teachers. So when I was getting ready to leave, you know, children can give you like real love. Everybody, if you talk, you know, kids can give you real love, right? This little third grade girl came up to me and she just hugged me and kind of threw me off because it's like, why? And so when I asked her, she said, it's because you said you care about us and you make sure we got the best teachers. And on my way back to the office, I was just riding in my car and I was saying to myself, you know, you lied to that little girl. You really don't care about whether or not she's got the best teachers, because the positions you're taking right now at the negotiating table does not ensure that she's getting the best teachers, that you as a union president spend $10,000 to go to arbitration to put a bad teacher back in front of students, a teacher that you wouldn't let get anywhere near your grandchild. And so for me, it had to come to a realization of, who are you? Are you someone who is simply going to carry the union role, and my role is to care only about the teacher? Or am I going to care about the children also that our teachers are teaching? And I came to the conclusion that I got to go back to where I came from, that don't the kids that live in poverty today deserve what I got 50 years ago? And that was a teacher who cared, even though it was in a segregated school. And that if I'm doing something as a union leader that is prohibiting that from happening, then I got to step outside that union box. And that's what I did. Stepped outside that union box and said, look, I got to do what's right for kids at the same time that I do what's right for children. And I believe that this is where, now, first of all, understand, I am not anti-union. I believe unions have a purpose. So I'm not one of those people to say get rid of all unions, because I can tell you, teachers need their rights protected too. And we have some principals, I can tell you from my experience, who are nuts. I mean, really are nuts. And so that we need unions to protect teachers' rights, but we also need for our unions to become a part of the solution, and that is to care as much about the kids that our teachers are teaching as we do about protecting the rights of our teachers. And so that is where I am today. Is at a point where it's about taking this thing serious. Because for many of our kids, especially those in low-income, poverty-driven neighborhoods, their only way out is a high-quality education. And that's where my dedication is. And so that's where I am.
All right, so thanks, George, for that. So based on the topics you've chosen, I have cards here. What we're going to ask you to do, I'm going to read your name, and when I read your name, you can stand up. One of our Student First staff will find you. They'll bring a mic to you, and then you can address your question. The questions that we don't get answered, that people have wrote down on a card, each of the panelists here said they will answer them over the next week, and then we'll post them online. So everybody will get a response to your question. All right, so the first person I'd like to call is It's a cool first name. Jazz Franklin. Where is Jazz Franklin? All right, to one of our volunteers, she's up the stairs. Do we have somebody with a mic? All right, right behind you. Jazz, we're ready for your question.
Sure. I am not an organizer. I'm actually a community, I'm not a teacher. I'm actually a community organizer for the state of Alabama with an organization called Southerners on New Ground. And basically what my question is what is the goal of this conversation? Because you guys are national names, and the budget has already been voted on here in Alabama, the education budget. I mean, there's already a great deal of rigid policies in place, and I'm wondering, so what is the goal of this real talk from city to city, and how can we make whatever changes or conversations we have here last in Birmingham or Alabama?
Hey, Jazz, that's a great first question, too, to start us off. Which of the panelists would like to address this? Michelle?
So I'll start. I think that part of the reason why the three of us wanted to come together to hold these discussions across the country is because I think the conversations around education reform lately have become incredibly polarized and very divisive, right? So a lot of what you hear is, well, they, meaning the education reformers, they don't think that poverty matters. They're anti-teacher, they're anti-union. They believe that charter schools are the answer. They want to privatize public education. All of these things, which actually are not true. And on the other side, you have reformers saying, well, teachers' unions, this, that, and the other thing. And I actually think that the answers so often to the sort of challenges that we're having and the discussions that we're having are not on these polarized extremes, but the answers are in the middle, right? So for example, take a hot topic these days, which is testing, right? So is standardized testing good? Or is it the root of all evil? Well, it's somewhere in between, right? We need to have a standardized, consistent way of measuring whether or not kids are, know and are able to do things at grade level. Every parent wants to know, can my kid read at the grade level? It's a reasonable thing. But what has happened recently in this country is that there's this overemphasis on testing. And so you walk into a lot of schools across the country, and all people care about is the test, which is ridiculous, right? So the answer is not to get rid of all tests. The answer is not to use tests for every single thing because that's the only thing that matters. The answer is in the middle, which is we should have tests. We should make sure that we use them as a means to an end, not an end into itself. And so how can we create an environment where that is the case? I think that the vast majority of Americans would believe, yes, that middle ground is the discussion we should be having, and yet those discussions never happen. It's always out on these ridiculous extremes. And so part of what we wanted to do, not to sort of come up with all the answers, but to at least spark a conversation in each of the cities that we're in, so that the debates can be more centered on solutions to the problem as opposed to sort of this mudslinging that goes on back and forth.
Awesome. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you'll see is throughout this conversation, there are places where we agree and where we don't agree. And I think that's one reason, that's one set of reasons to clarify all opinions. For me, this conversation is about engaging a community around issues that are vital to them and creating opportunities to have those conversations. We each separately go around the country and have conversations about them. I've been to Birmingham, I think 5 times. I actually have the key to the city. So in case y'all need to get in your house or something, just holler at your boy. So for me, I wanted to have a conversation because Kevin and I did an event in Atlanta, and there were 250 clergymen and women from 25 cities and towns, and I don't know how many states. And that's okay. Right. So every sector of the community seems to be more and more interested in this conversation around education reform. And it's no longer the purview of the educators. It's interesting that most of the people who are here are not educators. And I think that's the point. The point is that we need to pull this conversation out of city politics and out of just the classrooms and put it out into the public sector so that you can make the best decision for your families based upon the actual information as opposed to plays on data and personal attacks and suggestions about nefarious underpinnings for people who none of that stuff matters. We needed to open this conversation up, the kinds of wonky conversations that we typically have in Board of Education rooms or chambers and other places. This is your conversation. These are your children. We are your employees. So if you don't understand what's going on, in most cases, to one of the biggest budget items in your community and the most vital decision that you will ever make for your children, I mean, period, bar none, where you send your child to school, if you're not part of the conversation, then it's not really a conversation. We're just talking around you like you're not smart enough to figure it out. And I don't think that's cool.
Awesome. Okay. George, you want to say something or you want me to get through another question?
Well, very short is that I think this conversation is important because it's about having open, honest, fact-based discussion. Because one of the problems I think that exists today in the whole education reform debate is that each side presents information in a way that is favorable to them. In other words, as a union president, I can tell you, I presented information to people that promoted my side, my point of view. So first, and this is what has happened in ed reform, is that we first form a belief, and then we pump out information to the public that supports our belief. So it's not factual. Rather than let's get the information out, have a real honest debate, and then form your own belief. And so I think these kind of conversations are needed where we talk openly and honest about opinions and ideas about how to improve our schools without that information being going through some type of screening so that it only gets out a given point of view to serve a given interest.
All right. So our next question, Jaquisha Glass, are you here?
Right up there.
All right, up top. She's a student, so we need to get her a mic. And if you wouldn't mind standing and asking your question, and I think we'll have probably Michelle and George Parker address this one.
Well, I asked two questions. I don't know which question is on that paper. But,
should teachers be?
Okay. I wanted to know, should teachers be tenured? I'm a junior at Alabama State, and my major is early childhood education.
All right, thank you. George and Michelle?
Okay.
Should teachers be tenured?
Okay, my feeling about tenure is this. I believe in tenure. Now, I believe in tenure as tenure was intended to be. And let me explain to you what tenure was intended to be. Tenure was intended to protect your rights as a teacher, not your wrongs now. So look, we have, well, that's a fact. It never was intended to keep you in a job whether you are doing what's right or not. Now, tenure has grown into that, but let me tell you the tenure I support, and that is what the purpose of tenure was, and that is to make sure you have due process as a teacher. As a probationary teacher, when you get hired, most school districts in this country will give you a certain period that's called a probationary period, where the school district itself has the right to say, look, we just don't want you, you're not doing, cutting it. But after you go through the probationary period, you get tenure. Now, all tenure does, it says, we no longer have the right to just get rid of you because we don't like you and don't have to give you a reason. That once you get tenure, you're terminated for only 3 reasons. One is disciplinary action. That means you do something so bad that you need to be fired for it. Assault a kid or some other kind of stuff. The second reason is poor performance. That you can't do the job that you were hired to do. And then the last one is in case of a reduction in force. All tenure is to give to a teacher is the right for you to challenge whether or not this is a correct, action. And even our criminals, right? You are entitled to due process. That a policeman just can't say you committed a crime and therefore you go to jail. You're entitled to due process for someone to give the information that supports what they're doing. That is all tenure was ever intended to do. Now, school systems and unions have taken that tenure and made it into a job forever for some people. So I don't support that kind of tenure. I think that what has to happen is that school districts and unions have to take tenure back to what it was originally meant to do, and that is to ensure due process, but not to ensure or use tenure as a means of protecting people who are not doing the job they're supposed to do. So I support tenure in its original intent.
Chancellor?
I don't have a ton to add to that. I actually agree 100% with George about the need for due process, but the fact that tenure should not be a job for life regardless of performance. I do want to note one thing, which is that whenever people hear the word tenure, they assume that it is something that the unions have imposed, you know, this tenure, et cetera. And one of the things that we have to realize in terms of responsibility and accountability is that I don't know a school district or a state anywhere where the union has unilateral authority to impose anything upon anybody. Every collective bargaining agreement out there had to have the superintendent, the school board, the administration sign on to that collective bargaining agreement. And so the extent to which we have problems in this country right now with tenure, then we can't just sort of blame the union and say it's 100% their fault. No, our school boards, our superintendents have signed on to those things as well, and there is an obligation, if we feel like those tenure provisions are broken, for us to own the fact that there's another side at the table and that they have to push just as hard for the changes to those regulations as anyone else.
All right, thank you for that. Our next question is Bill Barton. If we have Bill Barton. All right, Bill, thank you for standing. We're going to get you a mic over your right shoulder. And I think best to answer this question would probably be Steve and Michelle.
My question concerns the, argument against charter schools that I frequently hear here in Alabama. And that is that charter schools are private, which is not my understanding. I have a daughter teaching in Nashville, Tennessee. And also that it is just an opportunity for some Minnesota companies or corporations to make big bucks off of us. I just want to know what you think is the root of that, what I would consider a misconception about charter schools.
That's an awesome question, and I know folks in Alabama realize you don't have charter schools in Alabama. So Steve or Chancellor?
Well, there's a word that I want to focus on, and it's the word private versus public. And when we hear the word private very often in the conversation around pre-K to 12 education, people get uneasy. People don't think of the United Way as private, or the Salvation Army as private, or the Boys and Girls Club as private, or Big Brothers Big Sisters as private. They don't think of these organizations as private. Somehow we've allowed people to paint the picture of the term private to be negative. Some pejorative term that these people have stolen your children and scurried them off to some distant land where they're going to fill their minds with things. It's a school in your same community. It's a organization that either is performing or is not. And if it is not, shut it down. I don't care who's running it, public or private, because we have real children in them, and every single parent sent us the very best child they had in the house. It's not like they left the good ones at home and said, I'm going to send y'all the fools. They sent the best people they could produce in their home. And since they've done that, public-private is inconsequential. So I want to first say the point about the private. I wanted to make that first point. The second point is the reason why many of the opponents in the unions are against charter schools is because the overwhelming majority of the employees in them don't join their union. And so they can't garner dues from them. Because otherwise, what's their issue? The arguments that I've heard them say is because they sometimes perform as bad, if not worse. So if we're closing all the ones that are bad, take yours out too. The arguments fall flat, and then you start to peel it back and look at what's really here. At the end of the day, all I want is a child to go to the best educational experience for them. For them. And I want you, the parents, to decide that if you don't like my school, you can take your kid out. Or if you love my school, you can send them there. That's your decision. We know that school choice is here. Ed reform is here. The water's out of the cup. Ed reform is underway. Either you're going to find a way to fit in where you get in where you fit in, or you're going to be left on the sidelines. Charters, vouchers, magnets, and homeschool, online school, they're all in play. And they're not going away. And some of them are going to be public, and some of them are going to be private. But the opposition is not about children. It's not about children. It's about job security and keeping a greater stake of control of the workforce.
Chancellor?
Totally agree with everything that Steve said. And I'll just say this. So for those of you who are not familiar with charter schools are public schools. They are run with public dollars. The difference is that charter schools were started a couple of decades ago with the idea that, could we give certain schools more authority and autonomy in exchange for more accountability? So the idea is we grant you a charter, usually for a 3 or 5 year period. You are expected to meet certain goals during that period of time. Again, you get the public dollars to run the school. And if you can't and you don't meet those expectations, then we revoke your charter, we take it away. But if you do, then you can keep your charter. So that's the whole notion around charter schools. What it has become in this country is this very sort of, again, polarized conversation where some people believe that charter schools are the answer, are the panacea to all of the problems that we have. And if we just made every school into a charter school, then we wouldn't have any problems. Those people are wrong. And then other people who want to say that charter schools are terrible, they're trying to privatize public education, they're not all this, which are also wrong. So what I would say to this community, and this goes to Jazz's question about how do you continue the conversation, is that there are only 8 states across the country right now. Alabama is one of them that does not allow charter schools. So this is coming, to Dr. Perry's point. You will have the conversation as a community. And what I would really suggest is that you try to avoid some of the challenges that other states have had, in that if you allow for charter schools to exist, which I believe is a good idea, you also need to make sure that there are very strong accountability measures in place, because there are a whole lot of crappy charter schools out across this country, and they should not be allowed to continue to operate. But we have forgotten about the accountability part in a lot of the states. So what I would say Alabama needs to do is say, yes, let's look into bringing a charter school law into the state, but let's at the same time ensure that our accountability law for charter schools is very, very strong, so that we are not in a situation where so many states are, where we have poor performing charter schools and high performing charter schools. Let's avoid the mistakes that other states have made, and maybe that's an advantage of Alabama being one of the last states to come along, is that you don't have to fall into the same pitfalls that other states have.
I just want to add one
That's not a super great advantage for Alabama. Though. Go ahead.
Let me just add a little piece to that.
I'm trying to be positive, and
I would add this. I don't think that your charter accountability law, which you will ultimately have, should be any different than your traditional public school or any other academic experience law. Bottom line is, if it is broken, set the children free. Let the people who work in the school send their children to the school if they love it so much. If it's that good for somebody's kids, it's an easy commute from your house with your kids, but don't experiment on mine.
All right, awesome. I didn't know if most of you understood how practical this conversation would be and common sense. And these folks get criticized as being the most radical educators in the country, and it's all just common sense, just easy to digest. All right, our next question. I think we have a 6th grade teacher here, Gail Harper, I believe. Hey, Gail, come on. Hi.
Thank you. I'm gonna get my card. I am a 6th grade teacher at Hayes K-8. And I wanted to know what is the number one thing teachers can do to improve the quality of education on a daily basis?
So this morning before I came here, I was talking to a brand new sixth grade science teacher that we have. And I think the first thing that you gotta do is fall madly in love with the kids. And I mean like stupid in love, where all your friends know every story about every kid in the build, like that, and you call them your kids and they think, you don't have a 12-year-old. You're like, yes, I do. I got 34 of them. Like that's the first thing that you have to do. That's first. Because then you want them to learn. And there's a difference between standing up and speaking something and teaching it, right? I had this Spanish teacher who, well, I know he spoke Spanish, and I might look like I speak Spanish, but I'm just fronting. So and I heard him speak Spanish, but the problem is he was the only person in the room who spoke Spanish. And I did not pay him to perform Spanish. I paid him to teach Spanish. So somebody else in there was supposed to pick it up too. So one of the things that we work really hard at our school at are objectives. Writing very clear, concise objectives, going back to them every 3 to 5 minutes throughout the lesson to ensure that children can walk away with a clearer understanding. And the way we write objectives is really practical. The way we write objectives at our school is, I can because. So for instance, one of our, a 7th grade teacher, she wrote, I can identify metaphors because I can tell you 3 metaphors from a Katy Perry song. And what was cool about that objective is the kids were going to other teachers' classes talking about the objective from that class. At the end of the day, it was a 2nd grade teacher, and she did something called a do-nothing notebook. It's a little thing, she told me she got them an O State job lot. And what the kids do is they write the objective in there, so when they go home to their parents, when they answer the question, what did you do today? Nothing. You can't say that with her, because you hit them with the here, and then you show them the objective. That's adding value to a child's life. Every single time you add value to a child's life, he wants to come back. You love him, and you teach him something, it'll be like you found $50 every time he sees you. Look and come right back to that spot every time.
All right, our next question. Thank you very much, and thank you for teaching as well. All right, I believe we have a 5th grade volunteer teacher, Eleanor Kahn. Is Eleanor? Awesome. We can get a mic right here. Thank you, sir. Over your left shoulder is coming. Good-looking man with the beard and the blue tie.
I am formerly a teacher, and I am now a volunteer teacher in a downtown Birmingham school, as is my husband, who's sitting here. And I think we were coming today because we wanted to hear what you had to say. But when we walked, and when we approached school, the sea of red said, there's a problem here. Because that sea of red should be sitting here. And that was my... And I understand the need to protect teachers' rights when they're falsely accused or whatever. I understand that totally. But I don't understand how those people can forget about the children so easily. And that my question had to do with how we can make sure that all the teachers wearing the red t-shirts care as much about the children as they do about protecting their rights, maybe sometime in the future if they need it.
Thank you. George, I think that's a good question for you to start off.
Let me start by saying this. I'm sorry?
You know what, can I say this? The interesting thing is Students First has done a great job of always inviting them to be a part of any dialogue and discussion. For them, unfortunately, often, it's better for them to be on the outside doing what they do to attract attention rather than come in and have to have a real honest discussion. So it is always an open door policy for our organization across the board here. So thank you for that as well. George?
Okay, yeah, let me say, I personally sent a letter to each union president in every city we go to invite them because I think they need to be a part of the conversation. But I think, first of all, I would not assume that even the teachers who are outside protesting don't care about children. I wouldn't assume that. I think that what we see outside is the box that I talked about earlier. I've had protests before as a union president, all right? And the protest was based on information that I fed to my teachers because I wanted my teachers to have my point of view, whether it was against reform or whatever, And then those teachers come with me to protest anyone who has a different point of view that is outside of the box that I created as the DC Union box. And so I think what we see out there is teachers who are believing the skewed information that their union gives them, as I used to give, but not that they don't care. A question was asked earlier, what can teachers do to improve the quality of education? Teachers can get involved. Teachers can begin to think realistically. What do I need as a classroom teacher? I used to tell my principals. In fact, I had conversation with superintendents as a teacher, and I would say, there's nobody I know who knows what I need to be successful with the 30 kids in my class the way I do. And I believe that same view of teachers, but what teachers have to do is stop closing their classroom doors or stop waiting for the union to define what the issues are, and to realize if you have issues in your classroom that aren't being solved, if you need resources that you aren't getting, if you need a disciplined building and you're tired walking into a building where the kids are off the chain, then that's reality. Then nobody's going to solve that problem for you, including your union, except you. That you got to get out there and you got to go to board meetings. You got to tell your union and you got to tell everybody else, what do you need in your classroom to be successful? Because, see, what is happening is that people are making more demands on you as a teacher, right? Now, the teacher pushback needs to be, look, I don't mind you having high standards for me, but here's what I need in order for me to meet the standards that you are setting, and you must share that. You must let your voice be heard. I did a workshop, and what I said to teachers is that, you know why teachers' voices aren't being heard? Because you're not talking. No one can hear you if you're not speaking up. And so what you have to do is speak up. Not wait for someone to speak for you, but speak up and say what you need to be successful. And rather than be outside protesting, say, look, you know what? I need to hear this so I can decide for myself if what those people are talking about is something I'm for or against, rather than letting someone give me information to say, these people are against you and children. Listen, I spent 30 years of teaching in low performance school. If it was about money, I would have been gone. As a math major, I had a lot of opportunities. So my 30 years in teaching was about children. When I became president of the Washington Teachers Union, it was about helping teachers. So now that I have a different point of view, I'm not the enemy. I'm saying I want to tell teachers and others, here's what you need to do to make your school successful, even if that's against what I used to believe in as a union president.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I just want to add, I travel around the country a lot, and oftentimes my staff will tell you there's a sort of whole bunch of people outside protesting, and they usually are handing out, pieces of paper that have all kinds of things about what I believe in, and I always wonder why people aren't actually willing to come inside. Instead of standing outside and speculating about what I'm about and what I believe in, come inside, ask me the question, let's have the conversation. And I will tell you that I am fully cognizant of the fact that I am not going to agree on many things with the people that are outside, but we can't further the conversation if we're on opposite sides of the wall. And it's interesting because I've had two experiences in the last couple of months. I went to Kansas City a few months ago and gave a speech. And the teachers union there said, come and hear Michelle Rhee speak at the public library, come and protest of her. And so 75% of the room was, AFT members, and they came and they asked, all the questions, and I answered them honestly. And afterwards, people were standing, to in line to get their books signed, and a lot of them came up to me and said, I was here to protest you, but I listened and I actually agree with a whole lot of what you said, so can you sign my book now? And the interesting thing was that the teachers union president stood up and asked a question. She said, I don't understand why you won't sit down with us to have a conversation because we want to help kids. You say you want to help kids, so why don't we actually sit down and have a conversation? I was like, great, let's do it. Send the lady an email, don't get a response. Send her another email. Finally, 3 weeks later, she responds and says, I am sorry, I cannot sit down with you to have a conversation because you believe in these things and those things are wrong. What? Last week in LA, at our first teacher town hall session that we had, there was a young woman, a student, who said, you know, well, I don't understand why you don't have more students here. And I said, well, because it was a teacher town hall, but let's do a student town hall. I mean, I'm all about hearing student voices. You can help us coordinate it. And she was like, okay. And then when I sent her the email, she sent me another email back saying, well, I won't have my name next to yours because you believe in things that I don't believe in. How is that going to help the conversation move forward at all if we believe that because somebody doesn't have the exact same opinion of you, when we shouldn't sit down? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so I feel like, again, you know, going back to what should happen in Birmingham once we leave, is we've got to find a way to understand we might not agree on everything, but we have to at least be in the same room at the same table to have the conversation.
All right, awesome. All right, I think this next question we'll give to Steve. Is Trisha Crane here? Trisha Crane, oh, down here on my left. If we can get the mic. Coming to your left. Your left. You want me to read your question or you remember it?
I remember my question.
All right.
Thank you. I write a blog called the Alabama School Connection. I have long-time education interest. How do you... Thanks,
They
y'all.
like your blog.
Thanks. My question is, how do you ensure that taxpayers' dollars are spent in the most effective way to improve student achievement? As a community, how do you ensure that? Any tips?
That is a great question. I'll answer a little bit of it and pass the time to you. In so many sectors of our country, we have vouchers. Student financial aid, Section 8, what used to be called food stamps, all the things I got to use growing up. Medicaid, Medicare, all vouchers. Direct to the consumer, direct to the provider. Direct. No one would presume that Section 8 has somehow destroyed the housing industry, or student financial aid has somehow destroyed public education, or that having Medicaid or Medicare has somehow ended health care. In fact, I think most people would argue that, in fact, most of those things are good. And the way that I think that this community can make sure that its money is going towards what matters to you is to create a school system that meets your needs. I'll take one step further. One of the challenges in education is, the biggest challenge in education, quite frankly, is not urban schools. It's rural schools. Schools for which children don't have many options, even if they wanted to have another school. That school's so far away, it's not reasonable. And so we, in 2013, have so many opportunities to teach so many different ways. Khan Academy is visited by 2 million distinct viewers a month. 2 million. 2 of them live in my house. And 700 of them come from my school. We know how to deliver a world-class 21st century education. We have to remove the conversation about who's going to keep their job or lose their job, put children up front, and that's when we'll start to make sure that the policies reflect the desires of the parents who are the taxpayers who fund the system.
I think one of the most important things that we have to do to get to where you want to be is we have to have transparency. Where are the dollars going? That is the first and fundamental thing. And so we've worked in states across the country, like in Ohio, where we've brought sort of, funding transparency to light. And it's interesting because in Ohio, as we were doing this, I talked to a state legislator who found out that in his district, in his school district, they spend more money per pupil on their cheerleading program than they do on their literacy program. Now, I actually happen to be from Ohio, and I can tell you that culturally, it might be more important to people to cheerlead.
Were you a cheerleader?
No, I was not. He's the coordinated one in the family, not me. But I think that until and unless people can see that information, you can't then advocate for something different, right? One of the phenomena that happens now is that it doesn't matter what school board meeting you go to in January or February across the country, you are going to hear the budget discussions and you will hear people saying, we need more money to fix our schools. And I can tell you firsthand from having run the school district that spent the most money per child than any other school district in the country and had the worst results, that putting more money into that system was actually not, at that point, what we needed. Because if you looked at the $1 billion that we spent on public education in Washington, D.C., as it turned out, only $403 million of that went into the schools and the classroom. The vast majority of it was spent by this bloated bureaucracy full of dysfunctional people and dysfunctional processes. So why would we want to put more money into that? If the public would have seen that actually we put a whole lot of money into it and only 40% of it goes into the classroom, well, the first thing we have to do is flip it. We should be putting 80, 90% of the money into the classroom where it's going to have the most impact, right? But you can't make those arguments until you know where the dollars are going.
All right,
And
awesome.
I want to add one thing to that. Another piece is get involved, right? In terms of, first, transparency. But say, how do you know your dollars are being spent well? I want to talk the local school, for example. And this is something teachers as well as parents can do. And that is the money that is available at your school, whether it is on-site type of funding where the principal has complete control of spending the dollars, or whether the money comes from central administration. The first thing that you do is school by school, at your local school as a parent and as a teacher. Ask the questions that, quite frankly, a lot of folks don't want you to ask. How much money do we have in this school? And let me see how you're spending it. That's the first kind of accountability. And you'll find out there, you may find that the money is not spent and the way that it should be spent to promote students' progress. But it is by first asking the tough questions, school by school. And you'll get pushback. Trust me, principals don't want to let you know what they got and how they're spending it. If you are a teacher, get involved. If you got someone leading your school who's afraid to tell you how much money we got in the budget, and here's how I wish to spend it, you're setting the groundwork right then for you not to get for that money not to be spent on the necessary resources that you need to do the job. That if the principal is more interested in putting new carpet in the office than getting computers for students, you challenge that because it's about accountability for that money. But you can't be accountable and hold people accountable without involvement.
I actually have a question for Michelle because it's along those lines, and I don't know the answer. What percentage of the billion, you said billion, that you guys spent in D.C. how would you break out that money? It's in broad categories. What was it? Because I don't know. I don't know what those categories are. I know some of them, but not all. Generally speaking.
So the astonishing thing to me was the fact that only 40% of the money was going into the schools. 60% of the money was sort of in the bureaucracy. And just to give you a sense of what this looked like, we had a department that was in charge of after-school programs, which is a good thing. I'm all about after-school programs. I want really robust after-school programs in every one of our schools, et cetera. This department had, I think it was 120 or 140 employees. And I thought, are you kidding me? Like, what are you people all doing in the central office all day? So we literally decided if we eliminated this department and took that same money, we could let every school hire an after-school coordinator on site full-time. Wouldn't that be a better use of that after-school money? And the further astonishing thing was that when we actually did that, right, so we eliminated that department, we went into their offices and we opened up all the closets and there were computers and printers and all kinds of things that you would want kids to have access to that had never been opened before, that they had bought through all this grant money and all this kind of stuff. So it is astonishing when you really peel back the onion to see where these dollars are going, how much of it has absolutely nothing to do with delivering this quality sort of services and resources to the schools. So I would say, very quickly to answer your question, not nearly enough of it was going to what we know is going to have the most impact, which is absolutely.
All right, folks, we only have 15 minutes left. And I know this time has went by very quickly. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to call on a couple folks in this set. Ask your question. I'm going to have Michelle address both of these, and then I'll get through as many questions as I have, and just one person is going to address them in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'd like Candy Streetley to stand and Chastity White to stand. Where's Candy? Here. Let's see. Chastity, all right? Okay, you can give your question, and then you do yours, and then Michelle will address them both.
Hi, my name is Candy Streety. I'm an instructional coach. My question was, thinking about the graduation rate in the state of Alabama, what do you suggest to be the main thing that would impact the graduation rate, and why do you feel that would be the most important thing?
Hey, I just wondered, for the state of Alabama, what is Students First, like a 1-year goal, a 5-year goal, and maybe a 10-year? What's your goals for our state specifically with Students First?
So I'll answer this one really quickly, which is, though we are a national organization, we are driven by our membership. So the 24,000 members that we have in Alabama will really be the ones who are sort of determining which policies do we need to tackle first because they're most relevant to us. So it's not like the national office is going to say, here are our goals for Alabama. That's going to be determined by our members here in Alabama, and hopefully a lot of you today. In terms of your question, I'll tell a really quick story, because people often sort of ask about, well, what is the most important thing that we can do to impact graduation rates? And I would say the most important thing that we can do is have high quality instruction going on in our schools. And let me just share a quick story with you. I went one morning to one of the worst performing high schools in Washington, D.C. And I was shocked because the first classroom that I went into only had 7 kids in it. Second classroom had 3 kids. Third classroom had 5 kids. I was like, where are all the children? So finally, the 5th classroom that I went into, I asked the teacher, I said, where are all the kids? And she said, oh, well, it's raining today. And I said, really? The weather is the reason why we're not expecting kids to come to school? She said, no. I said, good, because I thought maybe they're on a field trip or something. She said, it's Friday, too. So I was astonished by that, and kept my tour going. I went into one classroom that was full to the brim of kids. In fact, there were so many children that there were not enough desks in the classroom. The kids were sitting on the radiators all around the room. And this teacher was very engaging, was doing a great job. I talked to one of the kids, and I said, so tell me what you think about your teacher. He said, this is the best teacher that I have, bar none. I said, really, why? He said, 2 reasons. 1, he teaches us something new every day. And 2, when we have a question, he answers it. And I thought, okay, that's a really low bar for a favorite teacher, but okay. So anyways, I finished my tour of the school. I'm leaving. This is after first period. I'm walking out, and I see the kid that I was talking to in that classroom, and he's walking out of the building in front of me with 2 of his friends. So I tap him on the shoulder. I'm like, excuse me, sir. I said, where do you think you're going? And he looks at me and goes, oh, well, you just saw our first period class. That teacher's great, so we came to school for that. Our second period teacher, not so good. So we're going to roll. That is not the idea that the American public has when they think about truant kids, right? They assume that the kids are sleeping until noon and then going out and wreaking havoc. They do not assume that children are making very rational decisions about how they're spending their time based on whether it's bringing them any value or not, which is exactly what a lot of our kids are doing. So while there are challenges, I am telling you that the most impactful thing that we can do is have high quality instruction in the schools.
All right, thank you for that. All right, Dr. Veronica Zimmerman Brown, are we here? All right.
No, not related to George Zimmerman, thank you. I get that all the time now. I'm a university instructor, so I wanted to know, from the School of Education perspective, what we can do in terms of better preparing future teachers to be able to survive in the school system and to flourish in the school system. I say that because one of the things that we're starting to do now is get out into the schools more. It's mandated so that we can see what's going on. I think it's kind of hypocritical for us to try to teach future teachers, but we don't know what's going on. But from your perspective, since you're running schools and you're in schools and you're hearing things, what can we do to better prepare our students so that it can be class 1 teachers?
Thank you. I'll just go with Dr. Brown then. Weed some out, like from the start. Not every person who gets a degree should be teaching. So I think one of the most important things you can do is confirm that as early on and as often as possible. 2, teach them how to teach. I don't believe that you could be taught to teach. I believe it's a calling. You either have the skill or you don't, and then certain things people can do to make it better. And so a school of education to me is a bit of a misnomer. However, since you got them, they say they want to teach, in as many ways as possible, show them that when a child or a student is taught, they learn. So teach them how to monitor learning. It's too often that a person becomes passionate or focused in their subject and they get up there and they feed the kids with a water hose. And that's not, you just can't take all that information in. Teach them to pace themselves, and most important, that they have to want the kids to learn. It has to be vital. Last part, when we have an interview question that I ask sometimes, and I ask teachers, if 25% of your kids were to fail an exam, what would you think? What would you do? And for me, I want them to say, I want them to kick my dog, cuss somebody out in the way. I want them to be messed up inside. The answer is not, well, they didn't get it. They must own the learning. It is their responsibility to teach the child, not to complain about poverty or parents or anything else, to teach the child.
All right, we're going to be rapid fire here. We got Dave Holt. Is Dave here? Dave, all right. And then Dave, we'll have George Parker answer your question.
That's a great question. Let me say this, and I want to start with the teacher piece, because when you say how to get great teachers, and I think a lot of it goes back to your question about what can colleges and universities do. One thing that I think colleges and universities can do is to understand that teaching just the academic skills and the knowledge base academically is not enough. That you also have to teach teachers, especially a lot of the younger teachers that we get who are coming in today, that you have to also understand the culture of the students that you are teaching. And that if one thing that colleges and universities can do is to make sure that you equip students with the understanding that your knowledge base alone is not going to make you an effective teacher. In some situations, that you have to also have some sense of a historical perspective of the culture of the kids you are teaching. I believe one of the reasons that we have such an overflow of African American boys put in special education has less to do with their academic ability and more to do with not understanding the culture that black boys bring to the school system. And so as a part of preparing teachers, prepare new teachers, this is the culture of the African American boys that may be in your classroom that may be challenging. All right? In terms of principles, I think one of the best things that we can do as we teach principals is that academic knowledge is not it, that principals have to look at themselves as leaders, not bosses. I can't tell you the number of principals I've had who saw themselves as supervisors instead of leaders. That the principal training needs to focus on how do you lead? And leading means how do you support, number one, your first goal, how do you support the teachers in your building, and how do you become a facilitator to get out of those teachers the best that he and she has to offer? That if your focus is, George Parker, you came in 2 minutes late, you're not a leader, you're a supervisor. If your focus is, wow, George Parker, you'll stand 2 hours after school, your kids are really having great success, how can I get you to help other teachers with that? Now you're a leader. And that's what we have to train principals on, how to become leaders instead of supervisors.
Awesome. All right, we have our final 3 questions here that I'm going to get through. I'm going to read them just so we can have a little bit more time. We got about 6 minutes left. Is J.D. Carpenter here? If you are, just raise your hand. All right, J.W., I'm going to read your question. We'll give it to you, Michelle, maybe to start off. How can we properly support, celebrate, and partner with great veteran teachers and educators as we work with them to join the movement and build a new collective movement and a TFA grad?
So I would say that part of the reason why we wanted to have these forums is because teachers have to be a part of the education reform discussion. So, too many teachers that I talk to across the country say that they feel like education reform is being done to them, not with them. And right now I think we have a monolithic teacher voice in this country, and it usually comes from the teachers unions who say that the most important thing is tenure and seniority and, you know, stopping charter schools and that sort of thing. But when I talk to real teachers on the ground, I actually don't hear those kinds of things as their priorities. And so if you want, as whether you're a new teacher, veteran teacher, et cetera, if you want the conversation to turn, then you're going to have to be much, much more active in the movement.
All right, thank you for that. This is Larry. Is Larry Salisbury here? Larry? All right, Larry, thank you. I'm going to read your question, and we're going to throw this one to George. We have focused a lot on accountability, but let's consider student-parent accountability. Often, struggling learners and their parents have had bad experiences with school and lack the motivation to attend most of them. So what's the best way to address this? George Parker.
Boy, I just knew you were going to have a tough one. I just knew it. I think one is schools, especially public schools, there's this big, I call it misconception out there, that schools really want parents involved. All right, I'm going to say that again now. There's this big misconception out there that public schools really want parents involved. But I can tell you as a parent, just surprise the principal one day, come to the school and just say, oh, I just want to walk around and see what's going on. See how warm a reception you get. No, I'm serious. Now, if you really, really want parents involved, then you're willing to say, or even as a teacher, look, I've never had a problem with a teacher coming into my classroom. If you want to observe what's going on between me and your child, but as union president, let me tell you how many calls I would get from teachers who say, this parent just feel like they can walk in my class anytime and just have a seat. Well, here's the issue. The issue is the principal is reluctant to have you as a parent just come in and walk around and observe because they're afraid that you may see what's wrong, right? So I think schools have to be honest when they say they want parental involvement. Then that means you have to be transparent, and that you got to say to parents, look, if every time I get a communication from the school that makes me feel wanted, it's when it's fundraising time. I mean, really, parents are worth more than just, okay, we need you to sell X amount of candy or whatever to help us raise money, but then we don't want you to question how the money being spent. So I think it is to invite parents to be a part of the school career. Talk to parents about curriculum. Talk to them. What is it that we need your children to have, right? That's real involvement, and I guarantee you, you'll see more parent participation. And the same for teachers, that teachers will participate more if they feel they're empowered. And one of the things I say to teachers, if you want your union to do something for you, you tell unions to begin to focus on contracts that give you some input and power at your local school on the decision-making process. Those kind of things make a difference. And that will make a difference in terms of parental involvement, teacher involvement, and for students. I just tell you from my real experience, and this is something for colleges to understand, is that sometimes I was successful with what some of the kids that you call knuckleheads, right? And I can tell you the best thing I could ever give a kid was love. Kids, you cannot fool them. That if they don't feel you care about them and love them, you got a hard time. But I'm telling you, you can take the toughest student at the school. If you give them love, and it can be tough love, you can get miracles out of them.
Thank you. All right. We're almost at our time. I'm going to have Dr. Perry hit two things really quickly, and then Michelle, I'm going to have you have the last word. Dr. Perry, we talked about the question of celebrating teachers and getting them to join the movement. Give us a thought on that and Common Core, just the standards of Common Core, and then Michelle, I'll have you close out.
And then solve for cancer. First, can we give it up for Kevin for the job he's done tonight, please? In this environment, we're working as hard as we possibly can to be as transparent as possible. He's going through all your questions to make sure that we get the best sense of what it is, so please, I hope you appreciate the job that he's done tonight. It's a real tough job. The first question about celebration. One of the things that we do at our school is we have what we call leadership cohort. I don't believe everybody can be a principal. In fact, if you've not been the captain or led something or done something, if you'd have led a youth group, if you're not a leader, don't become a principal. Just don't. Do something else. Keep teaching. And what we've attempted to do at our school is we've created what we call leadership cohort. And these are individuals who we think can contribute to the conversation of education both in the school and outside. We meet regularly to have conversations about where they see themselves fitting in. We had one of our teachers, we had her in a leadership capacity where she was an administrator. She's like, that's not really for me, but she likes to lead projects. And so it's about finding the right leadership opportunity. She doesn't like to lead people. She likes to take on a project, and that's her project. Too many people who should be project managers have become principals, and that's a problem. So to celebrate the teachers, there's so many ways. One of them is to find out what they want to do. Sit down with folks, go into their class and say, basically, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because everybody still wants to do something. And so as we're sitting and getting to know them in their classroom, getting a better sense of what their interests are. And I, as a leader in the school, I say a leader, not the leader. Though I'm the principal, I'm one person on a very, very successful team. So as a leader in the school, trying to find strategies to engage them. Now, some people are prickly, right? I sent out an email to folks asking them to participate in something and didn't include one person's name on it because she's ready to fight. You know, but overall, doing what we can to engage what your professional and personal interests are so that we can make you feel whole. I can't wait, to be honest, I can't wait to go back to work tomorrow. Y'all got me really hyped. I mean, I think that we have the greatest job on earth. It doesn't get cooler than this. I don't know, I don't care what y'all do, but there's nothing more fun than this. We got a football game, we're gonna win on Saturday, we just won a soccer game today, we good.
Mayors of cities got cool jobs too.
No, they don't. So the other question was with Common Core.
We'll answer it on email.
Right, let me just say this to that, just in general. Common Core, just like other standards-based efforts, is still being developed. And, you know, we had some of our teachers take the third grade test. Folks like, damn, it was hard. So it's still being developed. I have no hand in it. I have no anything, you know, they're dropping it on my head like they're dropping it on everybody else's head. And we're trying to figure this thing out. But my hope is, and this goes to pass the baton to Michelle, My hope is that we'll take the approach of how can we make this better as opposed to protesting change. What can we do? How can we add our voices to an attempt to create a standard method of making sure that a child from Birmingham and a child from Hartford get the same education because they're both American children?
Awesome. So we will follow up online on the Common Core. We'll have everyone kind of address that in a way that they like. Okay, hold on. Wait. Do we have your, what's your name? Okay. And who else? Beg your pardon? All right, Terry and Bobby. Okay, no, I got it. Hold on. So Michelle, really quickly, this is a question I think was important to be addressed. It's from Melanie, and she said, Dr. Perry referred to his charter school as being funded at the same level that public schools and other public schools get funded. The question was, please define public funds and explain the difference of funds provided to charters versus public schools.
And first tell them that it's not a charter.
Right, so his school is just a traditional public school, part of the school system, et cetera. So in terms of charter schools, the money comes from the state and from the local district, taxpayer dollars, same as the traditional public schools, but it goes to these entities that are responsible for running the schools as opposed to going through the district. In some states, the money goes through the district first, the district takes a cut of it, and then sends the rest of it to the charter school, which we don't advocate for, but the bottom line is they are public dollars.
All right, great. So if you can, where's Blake with the mic? Somebody have the mic? All right, Tracy, grab Terry the mic. I'm sorry, we're going overtime. Overtime, real quick. Go ahead.
All right. I appreciate that you're allowing me to talk. My name is Terry Michael, and I am an advocate. I am not a teacher, and I am not an administrator. I don't have anything to do with the union. Oh, can I hold it? Oh, okay, nice.
Terry, let's get to your question, please.
I want to comment on the things you guys have been saying. You said tonight...
Terry, are you going to give us a question, though? We're going overtime.
I have been sitting here patiently listening to you. There's some points that have to be made. If this is going to be a true town hall, then we have to have dialogue.
Terry, we're at the end of the night. If you want to ask a question...
If you close all that's bad, take yours out too, that is divisive. That is not bringing communities together. That is separating them even more. Choice isn't about what they want, it's about what they can do. So what about those kids that can't go to the other schools, that they get stuck in those failing schools that everybody else has taken a dive out of, and they can't do it? We're telling those kids in the public schools that cannot leave them for the charter schools that they're going to get less funding, they're going to have lesser teachers because they're going to have all the TFA teachers. Did y'all know in 2008, No Child Left Behind was revised to change the meaning of a high-quality teacher? That we are lowering the standards of our teachers to make TFA be a highly qualified teacher. So we're lowering our standards for our teachers, but we're going to expect them to have more rigor in the classroom.
All right,
it doesn't work that way.
Thank you. Steve Perry, you want to address that? Thank you, Terry.
Gladly.
Steve, Terry. Hold on. Steve, you're up.
School choice means the same thing as it meant when people went and chose the colleges that they wanted to go to. They picked the school that was best for them. From the pre-K to 12, I don't think any child ever should be forced to attend a failed school, period. I think that every single child should have access to the same quality of education that our teachers do, that our administrators do, and that everyone else does. What works in conversations such as these is when people listen to what is actually said and work towards solutions that will impact children. It becomes very important when we're having a conversation around school choice to understand that there's no single choice that we're pushing. And that's vital. These notions, and I thought we covered this at the beginning, but it's all right if we got to wrap it up because that's what, you start with the objective, you end with the objective, right? I I can tell you what school choice is because I can explain that school choice is not being pro-charter, pro-magnet, I've said it, pro-neighborhood school, but in fact, pro-good school. And so I am for good schools for all children. And I use the word schools as a placeholder because I don't necessarily mean just schools. I mean educational experiences. I believe that a family who decides to have at least one person stay home to educate the family is as valid in their pursuit of a degree of education as the ones who wake their children up and send them off to a building. And I believe that both of them contribute to the society just the same. And so if I want that person to have a tax credit so that they're not poor, too poor to send their family to college when they get them there, that's school choice. If that's not the choice you make, I support that. I just want you to have a choice, not to be forced into failure. See, because the zip code laws are hurting too many children. It's real easy to have a philosophical conversation when your kid is not one of the ones who's going to come reading 4 grade levels behind because they went to a school that nobody who works at it would send their children to. So as somebody who sends his children to the school that he starts, I understand how vital it is to say that my kids are my kids regardless of who gave birth to them. I want school choice universal for every child regardless of where they live.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, Michelle, we had a question from Bobby P. here, which says, why can't all children go to these schools? They have lotteries and selection criteria. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. All right.
Okay, so
Thank you. So hold on, we're going to answer that question. I want to say, for folks that were in here earlier, this was addressed at a certain extent. But Michelle?
Yeah. So let me just say this. Dr. Perry actually said that because there is more demand for his school, for the spaces at his school than he has slots, that they hold a lottery. And the vast majority of states across this country that have charter laws, when that dynamic is in place, when they have charter laws and the charter schools don't have enough spaces for the number of kids who want to go there, they must conduct a lottery in order to determine which kids are coming in. So you can say that you don't believe it, but it is just fact. It is the way that the charter schools work. So let me just say that on the one hand. I want to also address this issue of like, well, you know, if you put these policies in place, it's so divisive. I had a situation in Washington, D.C. where we had a budget crisis and we had to lay teachers off. And it was an unfortunate situation, but I decided if we are in a position where we have to lay teachers off, then I'm going to lay them off by quality instead of seniority. So in other words, if you are a low-performing teacher, you're going to get laid off first as opposed to just last in, first out. When I made that decision and we identified 266 teachers that we were going to lay off, the politicians in the city went nuts. Right? And they said, this is so divisive what you are doing. This is tearing the city apart. I can't believe that you are doing this, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the politicians actually said, I am demanding right now that you reinstate all 266 of the wrongfully terminated teachers. And I said to him, okay, I'll tell you what. You have 4 children, none of whom attend the DC public schools. If you agree to send one of your kids back to our schools and allow me to assign them one of these ineffective teachers, then I will give that person their job back. And if you bring all 4 of your kids into the system, I'll hire 4 teachers back. If you can get your uncles and your cousins and your aunts, all send your family members back to be taught by these ineffective teachers, then I will give each and every one of their jobs back. Needless to say, he did not take me up on that offer. So my thing is, you can talk about divisiveness all you want, but back to what Dr. Perry was saying, you are not, if you are willing to enroll your child, your own child, in a failing school, then you're allowed to be against vouchers and charters, whatever you want. But if you have your kids tucked up in a Tony private school or high-performing school somewhere, then you are not allowed to put in place policies that subjugate other people's children to a reality that you would never accept for your own, divisive or not. This is about children and providing children with a high-quality education. It's not about adults getting their feelings hurt.
All right, wait. This thing is getting way out of control. That was her final thought. Who wants to give their final?
Give my final
Jordan, then Steve.
I want to give my final thought on this whole issue of choice. Because as a union leader, I can tell you, I've been against vouchers. I've been against school choice. I've been against it all. And I can tell you now, realistically, as I look at children who are growing up today the way I grew up, that I don't really care what the choice is, that if you are good, our children need you. If you're a good charter, they need you. If you're a good public school, they need you. If you're a good private school, they need you. And I think often as unions, we fight against the wrong thing rather than fighting for something. And understand what I'm saying. We're fighting against choice. What we need to be doing is fighting how to control the choice. In other words, say, if we want people to attend public schools, then let's spend our time as unions and as teachers and others making the public schools so great that when parents have a choice, we know the choice they're going to choose. And so we need to be spending our time fighting for something, and that is great public schools rather than fighting against people having choice.
Dr. Perry.
The families have spoken. They're pretty clear that they want choice. Throughout the country, it's abundantly clear that if given the opportunity, most families participate in a choice program of some sort. Even the choice of living in one town, not the other, because you thought those schools were raggedy. So it's all choice. Let's just be clear. But some people are upside down on a mortgage and can't move. Other folks are in some other situations that make it difficult for them to move, whether custody or otherwise. And so they should not be forced into failure because it's most comfortable, because it allows you to keep your job so you can send your kid to the school that you want to send your kid to. Our school has 4,710 children on the waiting list. We accepted 70. That's not because of me. That's because some people keep fighting to make sure that my school can grow. I would make a seat for every single one and their cousins in them. That's not me that's stopping it. There's no criteria. You got to have a name, address, and a pulse. That's it. There's no admissions process. Sign. And the number will be assigned to you. I get calls from all over the country, families saying, poor and rich, mostly poor, I will move. I will do whatever. I'll say I moved. Y'all need white kids? Jakeem is light-skinned. Parents are willing to make decision after decision. They are sacrificing. Say what you want. The ones who we seem to care most about, everybody wants to have this conversation about the poor families. Y'all don't care about the poor families because they're the ones who want choice the most. They're the ones who are using other people's addresses, changing names, doing whatever they can to get their kids up out of poverty. They get it. The same people that you said, well, they won't know which schools to choose. They seem to figure it out, didn't they? Because all the best schools seem to have a waiting list, and they don't read papers and they don't read data, but somebody told them at a youth football game, yo, you need to sign your kid up for that school. The streets are talking, the drums are drumming, and people know that enough is enough. Whether it's people on the far left or the far right, choice is the order of the day. That's what people want. You can try and fight all you want, try to act like you don't hear it, sit there, la, 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 la. Make you look crazy. The rest of us understand that we are in a choice time. That's what it is. I'm just telling you what it is. In Connecticut, for instance, if you just looked at the students who participate in choice schools, just the ones who participate, we'd be the largest school district by far, and that's the same almost everywhere in the country. That's the same almost everywhere in the country. Our waiting list alone would make us the largest school district. You gonna keep ignoring the people who are paying for this thing? So they keep putting their names on waiting lists. No, don't worry about it. They're keeping you out. No, they are not. The school operators are not. It's the people who want to protect their jobs and the systems that are in place. What you guys don't realize, maybe some of you know Mayor Johnson missed the last shot against the, you know about that, and some other things that have happened, right? But he also opened a very successful school. 2 of them, right?
Actually, 5.
5. I was, my bad, paying attention to. So, what we all understand, and do you have waiting lists?
Absolutely.
For everyone?
Everyone.
Every good school has a waiting list. The only reason we have waiting lists is because there are people standing in the way who won't let us open up more seats. I promise you, I spent all day yesterday, I spent the past 3 years trying to open up more schools. That's it. I don't want to be your superintendent. I don't want that job. That sounds silly to me. I want to run schools that the families say they want. And if you don't want mine anymore, then I'm out of business. You want it? Then we have a place for you. We call it Capital Prep. Welcome home.
Let's give it up for our 3 panelists. We thank you, Birmingham. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy Empowerment Week. God bless you all.